The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball presentation. As you know, you're not hearing the voice of the great Dan Besbris. He is having technical difficulties and cannot do the show today. So my name is Neil Rochelani. I will be filling in for him and hopefully providing a little bit of insight into fantasy, into my projections. I'm going to go through a couple things on this show today. Walk through how I do some projections. Going to go through one team and then also talk a little bit about over-unders, since this is sort of gambling week. Started last week, continuing this week, and going to give some insights on, I think, a couple of unders today. So start off by saying that listener leagues are open. For those of you who have already reached out to me and have asked to join, thank you for signing up. We're on pace to shatter last year's participation record. It was a record of 1 since last year was our first year, but this year I'm sure we're already almost there. So we're already almost at the listener mark of last year. So, or I should say participation mark of last year. So if you have not already joined a listener league and you want to, there are a couple of ways to do it. The first is to follow myself on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is Ball with Neil. That's BALLWITHNEIL. Also follow Dan Besbris, who I imagine you guys already know, but it's at DANBESBRIS, and tweet at us. And also in your tweet, if you could mention which league you would like to be in. If not, I can circle back with you. But we've got a few different options, actually a couple different combinations. So it's either rotisserie or head-to-head. Both teams or both leagues are 9-category and around 12 teams. And then the other option is a free league or a cash league, and all of our cash leagues are $50. I think that is it on the listener leagues. Oh, I'm sorry. One other way you could ask to join, and that is go to the Hoop Ball website, and on the website there is a tab for the forum page, and then within that tab or link there is a discussion board started by Dan, which mentions Hoop Ball listener leagues. I think it's got about 50 plus now responses, and it's near the top. So just add your email information or your contact information at the bottom, or I post there, and it'll show up at the bottom, and I will respond to you when I get a chance. I try to respond about once a day, usually in the evenings here. I'm in Chicago, so Central Time Zone, United States. Get back to you around 9, 10 p.m. my time, and get you that information, and then you can sign up. We will continue to grow these listener leagues up and through the early fall. We've got a bunch full, and new ones are starting, and if you get in a new one, I'm sure it'll fill up. So there'll be no issue there. If you want in, you have a spot. Okay, now I think I'm done on the listener leagues. So today I wasn't sure what to talk about, because I usually rely on Dan to guide me through this recording. But because of his absence, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I like to do in the off season. One is projections, and then one I'm just starting to do is the over-unders. But let's go ahead and start with projections, because I'm more of a numbers guy, and I like to put things in the spreadsheets, and I like to sort them and filter and put more numbers into them and stare at them for a while and try to figure out what they all mean. So for today's show, I am going to talk a little bit about what I do in this situation. And I do it really I use Basketball Reference, Basketball Monster for my data. Use Basketball Reference for other information. But Basketball Monster is where I get my ability to download data. And I will download averages for last year. So player statistics by averages. And then there's also the game played number shows in there, but I prefer averages over totals. I think totals can be a little more misleading, and I can always put in my own totals as I think how many games a player might end up playing. So I'm more concerned with the raw information, how many minutes they played on average, how many shots they took on average, how many three-pointers. I think you get the idea. Also the percentages. And I'm typically an 8-cap player, so I don't look at turnovers, or at least I haven't in the past. I'm just now starting to get a feel for how that impacts a player and their fantasy value. I do not. I'm not going to talk about turnovers though today because I'm not sure how to really project that going into the future. So basically, I am going to look today at the Denver Nuggets. They are a fantasy-rich team, and I think one of the more fun teams to sort of look at. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 6 guys, if I'm not mistaken. We'll do 5. 5 who are fantasy relevant, certainly in 12-cat or fewer leagues, for sure, and then perhaps some other bench players. But I'm going to try. So when I do the off season, what I'm trying to do is look at where they finished last year, look at their metrics, look at their statistics, based on what's gone on in the off season from both a personnel, and coaching change, and player growth or player injury or player role change. What might their projections or their stats be heading into this season? And the very first thing I do, now that I've downloaded all their data into Excel, I will just go through each category and think, is the arrow pointing up or is the arrow pointing down, or is there no reason at all to change? And that is the exercise I'm going to walk through today with a few of these players and let you know how I came to that conclusion. So first of all, let's go with their most exciting and probably first round this year fantasy draft pick, Nikola Jokic. I had him on my team last year. I absolutely love his fantasy stats set. Love his real-life basketball game. Love the fact that he's so young. He can do so much as a big man, really developing his outside shot. I know his blocks have not been great for that position, but still such a great natural shooter for someone that tall, and delivers the ball to his teammates so great. So anyway, let's talk more a little bit about numbers here, though. He played, just walking through his line, he played 75 games last year, 32 and a half minutes, took 13 and a half shots, made just about 50% of them, 49.9%. Made 1.5 three-pointers for a total of 18 and a half points. And I've gotten out of order, but I'm going to hop back in. Rebounds, 10.7. Assists, 6.1. Steals, 1.2. Blocks, 5.8. Free throw rate, 4.17. And made 85%. And so when you look at his total fantasy value, he finished last year overall 14th in a cat league. And his value came from points, really assists and rebounds, and the percentages were the big driving categories. He wasn't deficient in any of them, but it's really rebounds, assists, blocks. Actually, I should say that almost all categories he was pretty solid, but the rebounds and the assists are the two biggest drivers. And then the blocks, because blocks are so scarce, was solid. And then points, of course, were very good. Steals were just fine, just above average. And then his percentages were great with his volume. So he had no weaknesses in any of his categories, which is why I like him a lot. But let's look at how I think next year is going to play out. So at 32 minutes a game, that's really my fundamental driver. If I think that one's going significantly up or significantly down, I'm not going to, that's going to affect every single category. For example, if I thought he was all of a sudden going to be, hypothetically speaking, which of course is not going to happen, if he was going to go up to 38 minutes a game, that would ramp up every single category. I'm not sure about how much, I wouldn't just do a straight line factor, but I would do some sort of diminishing margins increase. So he would just probably get, for me, a factor of maybe 10%, which would be an extra 3 minutes, even though he's going up by 5 minutes. So in this case, I have no reason to increase him in my minutes. I know he's now being projected to go higher in the first round, and perhaps that's a thought because he's going to play more minutes. But for me, 32 and a half minutes seems pretty reasonable. I know superstars can get more like 35 minutes. I don't think Denver's an offense like that. I don't think the philosophy of the Denver system is going to play guys 36 minutes and then have the role players, the bench players play, just in the teens. They're more of a team that likes to play almost like waves, almost like hockey waves, where the top guys play in the low 30s, and then the backups play more in the 20s. So I'm going to keep this projection. So nothing fundamental across the board is going to change with my projection for Jokic's minutes. I think he's going to stay at 32 and a half. The next question is then, let's look at so the next category I'll look at is field goal attempts. Last year he shot 13 and a half, which again was pretty comparable to a lot of other players on his team. Gary Harris shot 13 and a half as well, actually slightly higher at 13.6. Jamal Murray shot 13.1. Millsap in his limited game time played 11.4. So again, what this is telling me as I look at the team story and trying to then get to the players' projection is that this team does like to spread it out, and they have a lot of guys who can shoot well and are willing to take a shot, and the offense isn't really fixated on one player. As good as Jokic is and as good as his shooting is, I don't think he's all of a sudden going to go to like a Westbrook taking 20 shots a game or whatever his metric is. 13 and a half actually seems, again, reasonable to me because I think Millsap is expected to be healthy, and I think he is going to take more than 11.4 shots a game, or the games that he missed last year, he only played 38 games. That's Paul Millsap again. And when he missed games, Jokic probably took a higher rate of shots in those games. So with a healthy Millsap back, I don't see how Jokic's shot attempts go up. So I'm going to leave him at 13.5 field goals attempts. Maybe a little bit, but again, this is just my initial thoughts of, do I need to adjust this up? Do I need to adjust this down? Or do I need to basically keep it the same? And for me, I'm keeping it the same. It doesn't mean I won't change it a little bit as we go into the preseason and we get some news about players and we get some news about rotations, and maybe there is some information from some beat writers there in Denver that Jokic is going to play more minutes, or the offense is going to somehow go through him more in terms of his shooting. It already does go through him a lot in terms of playmaking, but I have nothing at this moment to lead me to think that that's going to change. So I'm going to leave that as well. I also don't have anything to believe his percentages are going to change. So 50% seems pretty much what I expect from him again this year on the 13.5 attempts. 3-pointers, 1.5. That seems pretty reasonable. This league is shifting, obviously, to more and more 3-point attempts. What I've noticed is that almost everyone is taking more 3-point attempts. And then the high-volume guys are taking ridiculously more. So there's a chance I could adjust this 3-point number up a little bit from 1.5. It might just go up only because it's more like a trend of the overall league rather than a trend for Jokic specifically. So I may adjust it up to 1.6, 1.7. I don't know yet, but I'm not going to adjust it down, and I'm not going to adjust it wildly up either. So for the time being, I'm going to leave it at 1.5. So that leaves us with a few more categories. Let's go to the last. Let's go to the other one that affects points. Let's go through the free throw attempts. 4.17. That I'm not sure about. I'm gonna have to dig into deeper. I think that's a good one to leave as well. My gut says it might go up a little bit, but I don't have enough information to really change that yet. Nor do I have any inkling to change his 85% free throw rate. So I'm leaving those two constant as of now, which would then leave his points, since his 3-pointers, his field goal attempts, his free throw attempts, his rates all feed into that total point mark of 18.5. So that as of now, I think is pretty good place to start. No reason to adjust anything along those categories. So now we're left with the 4 other categories in 8-cat league: the rebounds, the assists, the steals, and the blocks. And these actually concern me a little bit in terms of, can they go up? The rebounds at 10.7. I don't know how he goes much higher. Certainly it's possible. But again, he played a lot of games without Millsap, who was your second highest rebounder at 6.4 a game. I expect Millsap to be healthy this year. So I'll have to go back and look at individual games where they played together and see what those rebounding rates were. I haven't done that yet. I'm just right now just putting broad strokes on these numbers, and I think Jokic's 10.7 might be a little high. So I might actually adjust that down, unless I find something totally wrong with the data that I'm thinking wrong about, and also do research as I dig into other people's analysis as well. But right now, my initial thought is it might come down like maybe a half a rebound or something. I'm not sure about that. The second category, or the next category, is the assist category. 6.1. That is so high for someone at that position, but I'm pretty sure this team is going to continue to use him as a distributor. And I'm curious to see those games when he played with Millsap, if his assists actually were higher because he was able to get the ball to him and Millsap was able to score as he's such a prolific scorer. So my first thought is not to change the arrow on that one. 6.1 seems right. Maybe go a little bit up if I'm right with my hunch there. Maybe keep it the same, but it's probably not going to be a drastic change. I can't just in my head envision it going like to 7, nor do I think it's going to drop all the way to 5. So I think it's going to be within plus or minus 1 for my projection this year. Steals per game, 1.2. I'll have to see if there's any trends or any information that will lead me to change that. That seems like a fair number. It's just based on what I remember watching him play and sort of seeing how his defensive game was. And this leads us to the final 8 category, blocks, which 0.8, it's a little, as someone like me who's very greedy, I want my big men to get like 2 blocks a game. It's a little low. But it's also not a bad number. And he's actually the second highest rate blocker in his team. Paul Millsap had 1.2 in the 38 games he played last year. And again, in order to really change this number, I'm going to have to look at how he played alongside Millsap. I'm going to have to look and see, did his blocks tend to go up when they played together because he could help out on defense, or did they tend to go down because Millsap was more the rim protector and doing maybe the weak side help, and Jokic wasn't really blocking many shots in that lineup scenario. So I don't know yet how to project this, but that's the way I'm going through this. And I would say my initial take looking at Nikola Jokic. So just to review, I'm not going to change the attempts, the field goal attempts, the free throw attempts. Maybe the 3-pointers go up. Excuse me. I'm not going to change the minutes, so that driving category. And so his 18.5 points may go up a little bit, but it's probably going to stay the same when I do my projections. The rebounds at 10.7, my initial gut is they may come down a tad bit. His assists, I think, are probably going to stay the same. His steals, I think, will also be around 1.2. And then the blocks, which is kind of the biggest category here to project, because a change of like 0.2 or 0.3 blocks changes his value. I mean, that can change him a few places in the rankings because of just how much or how valuable a block is. Like for anyone who's ever try to go back and look at their leagues after the season and seen how many blocks you need to win versus how many points you need to win. What I found is the comparison is for every 16 points scored, you only need 0.7 blocks. So for every 1 block, it's somewhere in the low 20s of points. So an extra 0.2 blocks is like an extra someone scoring. Oh gosh, I'm trying to do the math on my fly, but an extra few points of scoring. So it's actually much more a scalable factor. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a drink of water. A slight dip. Wow, I don't know if that helped, but a slight difference in blocks can make a big difference in players' overall value. That's essentially the point I'm saying, and I think you get what I mean. So that's my first take on Jokic. So last year he finished on averages 14th. And so I know he looks like a sure first rounder. I'll have to go back and see. Players can also get downgraded. So this doesn't mean just because I'm not going to upgrade a lot of his stats that all of a sudden his ranking is going to fall or what I think his projection is going to be. It could be that other players ahead of him fall, and so that he by default goes up. I'm not sure. I do think he's reliable, and so the one last factor I put in when doing my projections would be how many games played or what I think the injury risk might be. So for him, I'm not. From everything I know as of today, there's no reason to grade him as a big injury risk. There's no reason to think he can't play another 75 games this year or thereabouts. So that when you do that, then I'll get a total number of these categories, such as a total points, total rebounds, total three-pointers, by multiplying the 75 games to each metric. So that would then, I would do the totals of every player and then line them up and then get a ranking. So just because I'm not increasing his games played or I'm not increasing any obvious metric, except for maybe blocks, doesn't mean he won't go up in the rankings. Doesn't mean I won't think he's also like 8th or 10th or wherever he seems to be on ESPN right now. But it also means he could still be 14th or drop a rank. I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet with Jokic, but I do know he is someone I would love to have on my team if somehow he gets there. But he may be slightly overvalued based on my just initial take. Of course, these are going to change not drastically, but these are going to change, at the margins at the very least as we go into preseason, and perhaps significantly as we find out more about rotations, as I find out more about injury information of other players that perhaps are out that would impact this. As I find out any team news from the beat writers about offensive styles, things that come out, things that we see in the preseason. Hopefully your drafts are not until later in the preseason. I try to do mine the weekend or the week before the regular season starts, so I have as much information as possible and I can update my projections up until then. So that is my process on how I go through these players. And yes, I know it sounds really timely and really perhaps needlessly anal when there are sites out there that already do this for you. But this is something I enjoy. So for me, it's like a puzzle that I like to put together, and so it's fun. So for me, it's not like a work project per se. It's more just like a hobby. Spend a little time here, a little time there on, and I like to see how I can project, and I like to compare them then again to how it works out when the season ends. So that's my take on Jokic. Quickly, I'll go through Will Barton. I think this is probably only because he's probably the most, I won't say the most interesting, but he's going to be now moved into the starter's position. And so the initial thought, I think, for many people is that when you're starting, you are going to put more stats up than when you're not starting. Will Barton's case, that may not hold true. He played 33 minutes last year, and I can't see that going up. And now he's playing alongside Jokic, Millsap, Harris, Murray, other guys that take a lot of shots, demand the ball a lot, can lead the offense. And Will Barton is no longer going to be doing that. So this one, I think there will be an across-the-board downgrade for me. Not a significant one. His 33 minutes may hold, but I think his field goal attempts at 12.7 will come down. His free throw attempts at 2.7, 2.8 will come down. His percentages were solid last year, 45% on field goals, 80% on free throws, and his other lines, 1.9 on three-pointers. So if he's taking fewer shots, he's probably going to be making fewer three-pointers, although that may not be the case. He may be more of a guy who stands outside the line and shoots three-pointers guy. So he may turn into more of that role this year, although he loves to be a facilitator. I just don't know how that's going to blend with Murray and Jokic out there leading the offenses. So Maybe his 3-pointers go up, but I think his attempts are going to go down. I think his free throws are going to go down. I think his assists may go down from 4.1. His defensive stats may hold. They may actually get better because he may be able now to key in on defense a little bit better. Last year he was at 1.0 steals and 0.6 blocks. I think those are two possibilities where he might increase his fantasy value because he doesn't have to do so much on offense anymore, being out there with those other players. So maybe he can key in a little bit. Again, I'd like to see a little bit of where he is going into the regular season, kind of his role on preseason. I know Denver's defense was so lacking last year. Millsap was supposed to kind of come in and help anchor that, and maybe with Millsap in there, that changes the culture a bit, and these guys are now doing more defensively, or Barton knows that he has to do more defensively to be more of a value to the team, so maybe he's able to get a couple more, or get, a few more steals over the season, so increasing his average up from 1.0, or keep increasing his blocks up from 0.6. He's a very athletic wing, so it wouldn't surprise me if his blocks did come up. So, but I want to go through that really quickly to talk about him. So even though he's going to the starting role this year, I think his fantasy value may dip down a bit. Last year he finished 47th overall in averages in ACAT, and I think that will go down a little bit, maybe a round or two into the 50s or 60s, but won't be surprised if it held somewhat close, because he's able to make up his some of his lower shooting numbers into higher defensive stats. It's a possibility. Not sure yet where that's going to end up. Anyway, that's another player I wanted to talk about. I wanted to just go through two of those examples. The other three players that are obviously very fantasy relevant on Denver are Paul Millsap, Gary Harris, and Jamal Murray. All of them got a lot of buzz. All of them sort of finished in mid-round value last year. Millsap even, obviously he had a terrible injury and he was out, so he was a disappointment. But I expect him to come back strong and be sort of like Jokic light, except with better blocks. So that's kind of where I'm thinking he might end up, just as my initial take. Maybe like a 10% downgrade from Jokic across all stat categories, except for blocks, 10 to 20%. And then Gary Harris, Jamal Murray in the backcourt. Expect to have similar numbers from last year. Both played 34 and 31 minutes, respectively. I don't want to get into the details of those two players just now. I don't have a lot of time, and so I apologize. Or maybe it's a good thing, since I know you're probably missing Dan. But I do want to head over now to the gambling side. And before I wrap up, just let me know if you disagree with me, or if you have thoughts about how you do projections, or if you have any questions about players that I'm thinking about, or that you're thinking about and want to know my take. Please tweet at me at BaldWithNeil again. Welcome for any feedback whatsoever. Start conversations on Twitter about this. Would love to do it. A lot of time now in the off season, right, to do this stuff. So feel free to reach out to me, or at me, I think, as they say. So that'll be it on the projections. I think finally I'm done. So I will now move over to my last topic. Dan had talked about this was sort of gambling week. And as someone who likes to gamble, or at least likes to think about the gambling lines and try to guess what side I'd be on, if not actually making the bet. Excited to talk a little bit about the over-unders. Dan had me on a show last week where he had me present a few teams on which side I thought I was leaning on, and he did a good job to push back against me and take the contrarian view. So won't have that back and forth today, but I do want to talk about a couple of teams that I am right now leaning towards on the under. These are probably my two biggest unders, or not two biggest unders, but two probably most likely unders if I were to bet. The first one is going to be, and I'm a little bit nervous saying this because I don't know how this is going to be treated, but the first one I'm going to say is the Dallas Mavericks. Win total last year of 24. This year, at least as of the last total that I saw, their over-under is 34.5 wins, which is an increase by 10.5. And they are just, and while they're bringing in, of course, Luka Doncic and then the trade for DeAndre Jordan, and having, we're assuming a healthy Nowitzki in a limited but good role, along with the development of other players. I just think this is too many pieces to put together to gain 10.5 wins on last year. And I know they're going to be better than last year. I know Mark Cuban, I mean, he either tanks or he goes to the playoff push. So I don't think he's someone who's going to try to be a team that's either does not have a good draft pick or has or tries to get some actual real team excitement and get them into the playoffs. This year, though, I think they may be stuck in no man's land. I think they may be trying to push for that and they don't get there. Or, of course, they do tank again, and then, of course, this under would be easy. I just think trying to incorporate Dennis Smith Jr., who's still growing, who still has a lot of growing pains to go through, although I think he'll be a very good NBA player someday. Same thing with Luka Doncic. I think he'll be a very good NBA player someday. DeAndre Jordan can't do a whole lot to lead a team. I mean, he's such a great role player around the basket, but that's really what he is. He's a great role player who can defend and who can finish at the rim. He can't really do anything to help a team offensively or defensively other than to anchor that spot. So he's not going to really make – he needs to have those guys – he needs to have the playmakers facilitate to him. He's not someone who's facilitating to others. He's obviously great when he's being facilitated to, but he can't do it on his own. So if these guys are struggling to get him those looks and to sort of gel with him, so to speak, this could be a team that doesn't win as many games as they're projected. So that's my thought on Dallas. I love their management. I love their coaching staff. I like their young core. I just don't think they're going to get to 34.5 wins this year. Gosh, excuse me. So that's my first under. I'm going to do one more under here and then wrap it up. And I've got a few highlighted. I'm trying to figure out who I should take. And I think, well, this one's a little tough for me. I'm going to go with, actually, once again, the Phoenix Suns not reaching their win total. As I'm sure all of you know, last year they finished with only 21 wins in the cellar of the NBA. Got DeAndre Ayton with the first pick. A lot of hype around him as a real player and as a fantasy asset. I'm sure he can put up great numbers this year, or at least very respectable numbers for a rookie. I just don't know if that's going to translate into many wins. Like Dallas, they've also got new parts to fit in. They've got Trevor Ariza, sort of the consummate professional. I'm sure he'll come in and play his role just fine. But again, he's not someone who drives an offense or drives a defense. He's a great complementary player who fits in around already a good working system. So while he'll probably put up similar stats as last year, assuming he gets the same amount of minutes, I don't know if he's going to really be able to help this team in wins and losses too much because of how he fits in. The drivers of that offense, Devin Booker, and I think it's looking like Brandon Knight in the backcourt, haven't played much together. Brandon Knight out all last year. Devin Booker, not someone who really facilitates to others. Very good individual talent, very just beautiful shooter. Love to watch him shoot the basketball, but not sure his game translates into direct wins for his team. Brandon Knight, I don't know how those two are going to mesh together. Not a great passer as well. A respectable point guard, but not a great passer. So I'm not sure how he's going to fit into the offense alongside Booker. And because of that, because of their management, I'm not too big on, because we have a first-year coach now. I'm assuming he's going to be a fine coach, but first-time coaching in the NBA. He's coaching players I don't think he has much familiarity with. At least he hasn't been around the NBA for a decade and come across all these guys. He's got to figure out how to coach in this league. He's also have to figure out how to coach guys who've never played together, and guys that are young and guys that are perhaps not pass first guys. So this could be really interesting. I don't, and because of all those machinations and growing pains that I think they're going to experience, I'm going to lean towards the under on Phoenix as well. Right now it's set at 28.5, or at least that's the number I have, 28.5. So I'm actually not making these bets, by the way. The site that I use, I don't think has them up yet. So I'm not actually making any of these bets, just so if you do, and I'm wildly wrong, please don't think that I lost a lot of money too, because I'm not making them. I'm just going through and trying to figure out which ones I like and dislike on the over-under. So more entertainment than anything else. Perhaps if when my site releases these, I will make some wagers. But certainly I'm going to take the advice of not just my own analysis, but several other people that I respect in the gambling industry. So I recommend you do the same before placing any wager. Get several opinions on people you trust, and also do your own analysis. And so that's it. For the two unders I mentioned, Dallas under 34.5 and Phoenix under 28.5. With that said, I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. I'm not sure how this recording is going to turn out, so I'm going to apologize in advance if the quality is not great. I haven't done much producing yet. I'm just getting into that area, and also I'm still getting comfortable about making sure I speak close to the microphone. So hopefully this podcast is listenable. And again, for those of you who were expecting Dan Vespris, I apologize. He just had technical difficulties on his end, and should be back on tomorrow's show. And then just finally, if you are, just a reminder for listener leagues, if you are interested, please tweet at me at Ball with Neil, also at Dan Vespris. Tweet us together. Let us know which listener league you want to be in, rotisserie or head-to-head, cash or free, and I will send you a link to join that league within the next, at some point during the day. I'll send it to you, and then you can just click on it. Takes you right there. If you have to pay, then they'll walk through the process. If not, I think you're pretty much right in. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And Dan will be back tomorrow. And I think I'll be back with Adrian on Friday. So everyone, thanks for listening. Have a great day.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.